Good afternoon or morning or whatever time it is where you are listening or watching. Thanks so much for joining us for our live stream. This is your Son in Tech Mackenzie. Happy to have you with us today for the Friendly Tech live stream hour. We're going to, as always, make technology more approachable, less scary. You're going to be more confident because technology is not going anywhere. We've got to figure it out. And as you continue to enjoy these live streams, you're going to feel more confident, more capable. You're going to be able to avoid headaches. You're going to be able to resolve problems. And above all, you're going to be able to avoid scams, which is super, super important for us right now. So last week at our last stream, or in our last streams, we talked a lot about how the internet is like a highway that you use your electronic device to navigate, right? Sure, you remember that. We discussed how the email is like a PO box that you can use and how we could avoid, and even just how to detect some scams when it comes to email and phishing attempts when someone's trying to get information from you. And then we also talked a bit about websites, right? How to navigate them, how to recognize certain features. If, for example, you look at the screen, you can't see something that you're looking for, how to know where on the screen to find it. So if you missed those, please go to the channel and we will have those there for you, and you can watch the full stream, get all that great information. So just a couple of reminders. What's so nice about the live streaming format? I know some of you watch or in the habit of watching afterwards, which I totally understand and appreciate any and all support. Please be sure to like each video and to make sure you're subscribed and click the bell so you know when there's new kind of content available. But what's cool about the live stream is in real time. You can ping me for a question. Hey, I didn't quite get that. Or can you slow down a little bit? You're able to give me that real time feedback or ask for clarification. So it's really nice when we're able to do the live stream together. So feel free to use the chat feature. I try to keep my eyes on it. I do have a million things going on the screen, but don't worry. Happy to help. So a couple of reminders before we get into our material for today. If you have a particular question that you want answered, you can always put it in the chat. I try to respond when I can, but I can't guarantee I can answer every single question. And also, if you really have a question that is urgent, we have one-on-one help sessions that we offer. You can check those out on our website, which is getfriendly.help. Let me just show you a couple of resources there so you know what I'm talking about. So you can join our private live stream. We'll be starting those in October each Monday. And there I just answer questions, right? The things that you need to know the answer to, that's where I answer them in real time. So you can, we can kind of have a back and forth exchange and you get your questions answered. But if you don't want to share time with others, well, the great news is you don't have to. You can always set up a one-on-one session by going to our website, right? Go to the website and you can set up a one-on-one session. We'll be able to talk, be able to kind of resolve any, kind of questions that you might have. And that's probably my favorite thing, is being able to help you get those sorts of questions answered. So enough of the business. Let's get down to our discussion. So today, we're talking about passwords. Yes, you need to enter your passwords again. I know it's frustrating, right? I know it's something that is challenging for everyone. I have to deal with this a lot in my regular job. I'm always having to put in my password, sometimes multiple times in a day. And I know it feels annoying. But that little bump in the road that you're experiencing is actually one of the most important safety mechanisms that happen while you're online. So it is really, really important that we take seriously the passwords. So let's back up, because we want to be sure that we take all of our lessons with us, right? We want to make sure that we remember all of our points. And there's a reason why we want to take those points with us. So first of all, let's just back it on up to our basic illustration, right? Our basics. The internet is like a highway, right? Internet's like a highway. We know that, and that's super important to keep in mind. And we built on this, right? If the internet is like a highway, then the websites are like the stores and businesses along that highway, right? Super, super important. And then, of course, we talked about email. Email is like your P.O. box. Now, here's what's interesting is both, let's just back up. That store, you see the door there, right? Do you imagine there's a lock on that door? Of course, there's valuables in there. They want to make sure their stuff is safe. And look at the P.O. box. Same thing. There's a lock on it. Now, I don't know about you, but I remember growing up, and maybe just take a second and think back. Just try to embody maybe like 5 or 6-year-old you thinking about life, maybe a little earlier, 8 or 9-year-old you. You probably did not think very much about locking the doors of your house, right? It wasn't a thing, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And even before, we just didn't think about it until what? There was definitely a moment where we went from not thinking about it to, okay, everyone has to think about it. And then we advanced to security. Now we want maybe security doors, or now in the modern time, maybe we want cameras. But what was it that gave us that sense that we needed additional security for our homes? It was because there was a change in the way people behave, right? There was more theft, or maybe there was a report of like a prowler in the community, but something made us realize that it was no longer safe, right? That we couldn't just be kind of careless when it comes to the safety of our home. And the same is true of our cars, right? Maybe you would just get out of your car, leave the windows down, wouldn't even think about locking the car. Right now, people have 24/7 cameras on their car for the same reason, right? Because there's a change in the way people behave. So everything that's happening in the real world is also happening on the internet. And this, again, is not fear mongering. It's just reality. You don't have to be afraid. You just have to be aware. Remember, you don't have to be an expert, but you're no dummy. Now, understanding the need for passwords is just basically step number 1. It's a security mechanism, right? Just like the locks on your car or your home, it's just a way to secure things. And specifically, it's a type of security called proof, right? Online, we use our email addresses and our passwords that come along with it as proofs of who we are, right? So your email address, in most every case, your email address is going to be some information that only you know, right? So that's a way for you to prove who you are. And so that's something that you'll notice. Maybe it'll ask you regularly to log in with your email address, right? That's just a very typical thing because that's a way for you to prove who you are, right? Proof of identity is what that email and password combination does, right? And we'll talk a lot about that later, but let's just continue with our thought about back in the day, right? How we used to think about things back in the day. So let me grab a little image here for you. Maybe you remember this. Do you remember when your car had 2 keys? You remember that? Cars used to have 2 keys. I know for a younger person in the audience, this probably sounds like nonsense to you. But back in the day, yes, every single car had 2 keys. All of them. This was just a standard. It was just a standard, right? 1 key served what purpose? Well, that 1 key was for the doors, right? You had a door key and it would only let you in the car. And then you'd have a secondary key that would start the engine, right? So in the chat, you can put in if you remember when cars used to have 2 keys. I remember this very, very vividly because I like to unlock the doors, right? And then, kind of getting the front seat started up. That was something I remember very, very vividly. But what was the purpose of those 2 keys? Well, it was because in case you lost the door key, right? You weren't in a bad situation. No one could take your car. It was just an extra layer of security. And so interestingly, we've kind of brought this concept back when it comes to technology, especially when it comes to like proving that we own a vehicle. There's kind of 2 keys, or a vehicle. See, I'm in that illustration, right? That you own a device that you use on the information superhighway, right? The way that you prove it is usually you need passwords, two different passwords. And this isn't complicated. This is actually very simple if you look at it from that perspective of door to the car as well as door to the engine. So the first password, your first key, your first vital key for your device, right? You have to have this to be able to use it. That is your PIN or the password, right? So you may have a passcode that is a set of numbers, right? Between 4 and 6 numbers that will unlock your phone. Or you may have that pattern that you see there, those 9 dots, and then you kind of draw a certain pattern that only you would know. So that's the one key or the one password, you could say, for your device. That's like opening the door. But to turn on the engine and get on that highway, right, you need another key. There's a second vital key, and that is your email and your password, right? Without entering an email and a password into that device, you're not going to be able to get it on the internet, right? You need both of those things. The PIN to open the phone, whether it's a set of numbers or you swipe the lines, and then also your email and password. This is extremely, extremely important that we remember those two things. And so that the reason why the email and password is so important is because, like we talked about, it's like an identity. So your device, it has the IP address. We talked about that in our early streams. And that's a way for when you're online for your device to be recognized, right? So you may have heard like a story about maybe someone committed a crime and then they track their IP address on their device. It's so that you can't just do things anonymously. You can't just send information out there anonymously. It's always connected to you, right? And so these pieces of information come together in an interesting way that kind of proves you are the owner of the device. Here's why that's cool, though. If someone were to take your advice, there's safety protocols, right? So if they take it and the screen is locked, but they don't know that PIN or password, they can't get in. So it's useless to them. They're not even going to waste their time. But even if they did know it, if they don't know your email and password, they still can't use it. So it's a very cool way to protect your device. And this proof of ownership is it's just a part of owning any device, is using both of those keys to unlock the ability to use your device. So this is a concept we call proof of ownership, right? Those three things coming together. And we kind of understand this intuitively, right? We intuitively understand that you need a couple of different points of information to prove that you are the owner. And so you have to set that up for every single device, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a computer or a TV. We have to do this exact same process with the PIN, the email and password combination to confirm your identity. Is that tedious? Yes, I know it's tedious. It is. But is it necessary? Yes, it is. So let's just take a look at a familiar illustration when we're talking about proof of ownership. You're familiar with how this works. You've got your driver's license, right? Your driver's license proves that you are you. And when you get that vehicle, you go to the motor vehicle department, right? And you register that vehicle and they give you a license plate, right? So that can identify the vehicle. It identifies you as the driver. But then are we sure that that is your device? Well, then you've got the VIN, the vehicle identification number, right? Those three pieces come together to prove you are the owner. So if anyone tried to steal that car, you could say, wait a second. My license is registered to that license plate with that vehicle's VIN. This is mine, right? That's your protection. And it's the same way with your technology, right? The exact same concept works with your technology when it comes to proof of ownership. So let's just review those points together. right? You want to set up your device unlock, right? That is either the pin with numbers or the little swipe. That's thing number one. But you also have to have your email address and password, right? And you want to secure these things. You want to make sure that that unlock is a pattern or a set of numbers that you're not going to forget. And if you think you might forget, you better write it down somewhere, right? Somewhere that's not attached to the computer. That way you're able to keep it in mind. Same way with your email address and your password. We'll talk about some tips and tricks on how to make that easy for you in just a minute. Then lastly, of course, there's a third-party verification. That third-party verification is just the app that exists on the device where you put all that information in. It just verifies that you are who you say that you are. Now, you do these steps every single time you get a new device. That proves that you are the owner. That's a lot of passwords. I know. That's a lot of effort. But again, it protects you. This is especially important for those of you that use Apple products. You really want to secure your passwords and your pins because they frequently ask, more so I think than any other platform, for your passwords. Because without it, you're not allowed to log in to anything. You're not allowed to download anything. It's a feature you can turn off, but I don't recommend that you turn it off, right? So let's go to another topic, right? Sometimes you have to re-enter. Sometimes you have to re-enter the password. And that's the annoying part. It's kind of like, didn't I already prove that I am who I say I am when I put the password in the first time? Didn't I already do that? Why do you need me to put it in again? Well, it revolves around this idea of proof of identity, right? The idea of proof of identity. So we kind of talked about this a bit in the past when we talked about email. We talked about it a little bit earlier. But let's put some of these pieces together. If websites and apps that we use are like businesses along the highway of the internet, you certainly are aware that some businesses require that you have a membership to use them. For example, a local gym, or maybe a company like Costco, right? And they do that for security purposes. And so they also know a little bit about the purchasing habits or the activity habits of their clients. They make you have a membership. And some memberships are totally free. They just want you to have a card. So maybe your local grocery store, they may have a card that they require you to use when you check out. But when it comes to paid memberships that requires a card that you present before you even go inside, see, this is a protection mechanism, right? They want to prove that you are who you say that you are, right? So when we apply this to the internet, when we apply this to certain websites and certain apps, it's the exact same concept, right? They're just trying to look for proof of who you are as an individual. So what happens if you go to Costco, or rather you give someone your card and they go to Costco without you present, and they show it at the door, the person turns it over and looks, and they say, this isn't you. They're stopped, right? They stop them right there at the door. You can't even come in here because I need you to prove who you are. The same is true online. You have to prove your identity, right? And so because there are very sneaky ways for people to try and assume your identity while you're online, apps and websites have something that they call sessions. Well, let's back up. Let's hit one more point about passwords, and then we'll talk about sessions. A password is like that game telephone. Remember the game telephone where you would tell someone something and they pass it on? It's like a game of telephone that only involves two people, right? Where you've told them essentially a secret. You've revealed to them a secret that's only between you two. No one else knows that this secret exists except you and the person. That's essentially how an email password works. So if you use, let's say you're an Apple user, so you go to iCloud, you set up, this is Mackenzie from Friendly Tech Help at iCloud.com, right? They're going to say, give me a password. So what they're really saying is, tell me a secret. Tell me a secret, right? That's what they're actually saying. When they tell you, they prompt you to log in, they're saying, tell me a secret that only me and you know. And I'll keep it a secret too. That's their promise to us, is I'll keep this a secret that only you and I know. But when I want to know if it's you, I'm going to ask you for that secret. I want you to prove to me that it's you by telling me the secret that you told me before. And so because you're the only one that knows, this is a way for them to verify that you are who you say you are. Does that make sense? There's certain times where you tell a person a secret no one else knows, and the fact that you both know it is the proof that you are who you are. Is the exact same concept. So, all right, let's go on to why this is really, really important. So again, when you sign in with your email and your password, they've asked you, tell me the secret, and you have told them the secret, and they say, oh, it is you. Welcome. Welcome. You're logged in. You have successfully logged in. Once that's done, because people can assume your identity, and we'll talk about some ways that that's possible. Websites and applications have something called a session. From the moment that you sign in successfully, once you've done that, a timer starts. Right? A timer starts. Doesn't that look like the thing from Days of Our Lives? I didn't mean to pick that particular. No, the one on Days of Our Lives was gold. Sorry, this one's wood. But it reminded me of that. But as soon as you log in to the website or the app, the session timer begins, and then it's counting down. Right? And some websites have really long session timers. For example, some of them are weeks or months even, right? Like your social media apps, or your email app on your phone. They may not ask you for your password for months and months and months, because the assumption is that you are in possession of that device and there's no need to worry about it. However, some have sessions that are only a couple of minutes. They're really, really brief. And so you've probably experienced this, where you're online, you're working on something, you might get distracted for just a few minutes, not for a really long time, for just a few minutes. And when you come back, you're logged out and it says, please enter your password again. Please, quote unquote, tell me the secret that only you and I know again. Why do they do that? Like when you're trying to purchase some airline tickets, or maybe you're doing some online banking. It feels like if you walk away for 30 seconds, they're saying put the password in again. The reason that they do that is because things happen, right? Things happen along the way, right? And so all they're trying to do is just check in. Hey, is it still you? Is it still you, or has someone tried to assume your identity? Prove it. Tell me the secret. Tell me the secret that you told me before that only you and I know, so that I know it's you. I don't want anyone else getting your information, right? It's just a means of protecting you. It's not their effort to be a burden, to stress you out, to make you upset. It's none of that. It's just a protection. So some things could happen while you're under a session. You've logged in successfully, but maybe you're in a public place. Maybe you're at a Starbucks and you're on your computer. You just run to the restroom. Someone could just walk right over to your computer, try and start using it in that 1 minute, right? Or maybe a hacker will try to do something and break in, and they notice a weird anomaly that could be you or could be a hacker during your session. And so they say, well, now wait a second. Was that you? Or you could have just been idle for too long. Maybe you just had the page open for too long and they're saying, hey, I need you to prove again that it's you. This isn't a punishment. This isn't anyone trying to hurt you. This is the same idea of your car door locking every single time you get out. You close it and it locks behind you. It's that same idea. Or like an automatic lock on your house. The same idea. So let's just mentally for just a second, let's just lock this in. If you're asked to re-enter a password, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It may feel annoying, but it's a sign that your information is safe. Right? They wouldn't be asking you to do that if it weren't to keep you safe. In fact, you may not know this, but U.S. banks are required by federal law to log you out after a certain brief time period of inactivity. it's a law. So it would be a felony for them to not do that. That's how serious protecting your information online is, right? So there's a reason for what they're doing. Now, I hope that's clear. If that's not clear, please let me know in the chat. Ask any questions. It's no problem. I'm happy to break that down for you. I'll keep my eye on the chat, but for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. We're going to talk a little bit about the way that these scammers think. You probably, because you're not a scammer, you probably have not thought very much about the way that scammers think. But they have a very simple methodology. They want information. They want access to your thing, right? That's their objective. So their logic when they're trying to go about this, right, is very similar to maybe someone like in a neighborhood that's trying to break into homes, right? The first thing they'll do is just walk up and check the lock, right? Just, why make it hard for yourself? Just go and check and see if the door is even unlocked, right? And then if it's locked, okay, well, maybe try a window. And if the window's locked, okay, well, maybe I'll try something else. Maybe they left a side door open while they were doing some yard work. Whatever, they're thinking about the easiest ways to get into your home. And because of those things, right, that's why we have locks and the things that we have. So it's very similar when it comes to these scammers online. They're looking for just the easy way in. They don't want to have to actually do any work. So here's a bit about how they think. There's three basic kind of levels of effort that they want to put in. Number one, they're just going to try and guess what your password is randomly, right? Maybe they could find, because of public records, they could find your date of birth. They could find the date of your wedding, and they'll just try those things to see. They can find out where you work if you're on LinkedIn, or where you used to work if you're retired. If you're on Facebook, they may be able to find out what your special interests are, right? So they'll just try and maybe take that information and guess. If you were married, September 22nd, 1988, then they might just try 9221988 just to see, right? Or maybe love, right? They just try something like that, random. The second is they'll just use the common passwords, right? The 1234566. Believe it or not, that is actually not a very clever password. It serves the purpose. It's not very clever. That is not going to prevent anyone from guessing your password. Even if you add maybe an exclamation mark at the end, or those are very, very common passwords. So they'll guess those too. And then the last thing that they try to do is trick you. They try to trick you into giving away this information so that they don't actually have to figure out what it is. So that's their three things. They're going to, kind of use random information and guess. They're going to use the common passwords, the 123456, or the things like that, the initials of your children, those kind of basic things that are common. And then lastly, they're going to try and trick you into giving it away. So for those first two things that they do to try and get your password, there's some very simple steps that you can take. And it's really just making quality passwords. That's really what it boils down to, is using a high quality password. So here's 3 tips for high quality passwords. Number 1, make it longer than 10 characters. That's number 1 because typically people use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe they put a 0 on either end of it. Make it more than 10, right? Make it more than 10 characters. Maybe use some symbols, maybe use some other things like that. But ideally please don't use, do me a favor. If any of your passwords, and this is just, do it for Mackenzie, please. If any of your passwords are just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, please just pause the video. You have my full approval. And in fact, I'm encouraging you, just go and change those right now. That's not a good idea. So your password needs to be longer than 10 characters. That is numbers, letters, syllables, or symbols. You'll notice the second thing is to make a mix it up, words, numbers, and symbols, right? This is really, really important to just kind of mix it up a little bit. Now, admittedly, this will make it harder for you to remember the password, to make it more than 10 characters and to make it a mix of words, numbers, and symbols. That is true, right? It's very easy for us to remember 9 digits, right? Our phone numbers are 9 digits. In most cases, depending on how you write things, most of the numbers that we use, a lot of like government ID numbers, school ID numbers, these things are often 9 digits. When we get beyond 9, research shows it's harder to remember once you get to 10, 11, and 12, and it's almost impossible for the average person to remember up to 17, right? So it's going to be more difficult. We'll talk about how to keep that organized in just a second. So longer than 10 characters, a mix of words, numbers, and symbols. And then lastly, if at all possible, just make it something random and meaningless where it really isn't words at all. If you can do that, you've got a great password. You've got a great password. And it's so important that we do these things to make our passwords challenging. That prevents the scammers and hackers from getting into our information. So the last thing that we talked about scammers try to do is they try to get you to give them the information, right? They try to trick you somehow into giving you, just volunteering it, right? It's like they just say, well, just leave the door open. Essentially, that's what they want to do. How do they do this? How do they try and do this? Well, I'll tell you, it's not that complicated. It's actually very easy to spot. Here's 3 things that you can do to not give them your password. Number 1, no company will ask you for your password via text message. No company will ask you for your password it's not going to happen, right? If you get a text from someone saying they represent a company or a government agency and they request your password in that text message, that is a scam. That it never is how any official business is conducted. So if you get a prompt in a text that says, hey, just enter your password so you can recover your account, just delete it. Don't let your curiosity get the best of you. Just delete it. The second thing is sometimes by means of a text message, they will send you to a website for you to put your password in. Now, I told you a story about my friend a couple of weeks ago who this happened to. He lost his phone and he received a text that he thought was from Apple, and it sent him to a spoof website that looked like it was Apple. But in the address bar, there was a very obvious mistake, an extremely obvious mistake. Right? So make sure you verify the website that you're on before putting in your password. It should look like it always looks. If it doesn't, don't put the password in. And lastly, don't put a password anywhere when you're really stressed out, because you're more likely to make a mistake. So if you get the sense that something is urgent, I really need to do something, or you're prompted that you only have a certain amount of time to do something, don't put your password in. Take your time. Get your footing. Think through the situation. Don't put your password into anything when you're stressed. It's just easier to make a mistake, and it's likely that it could be an expensive mistake. So, how are we doing so far? We making sense? We're understanding how to do this? Very good. Let's talk about how to make things easier for ourselves. Something easy for us. This is my favorite. The easy tips. Make it simple for yourself. Unfortunately, it may not sound simple. Don't let it intimidate you. You're not an expert, but you're no dummy. You can figure this out. Okay, let's get into it. How to simplify this password game. Because the more complicated the passwords are, they are safer, but they're harder to remember. So then that presents us with a problem. If it's safe, but I can't remember it, what use is it? Well, there's some things that you can do to help yourself. Here's a list. Here's the tips to simplifying the password game. Number one, you can use something called a password manager. Now, there are two basic forms that these take, and I'm confident you're using one of them right now. That's just to write it down in a book. To write it down in a book. That's not a bad idea, right? It's not a bad idea to write down your passwords in a book that only you have. In fact, it's a great idea. Here's the problem. The way that you write down the password is very, very important. If you just write down what you put in as a password and no other information, what's the likelihood that you'll remember the associated username or email address, the website or application that it goes to, and when you set it up? Not very likely. So when you're going to write down your password, here's a couple of tips. Number one, keep each password on its own page. If you're going to write it down, you can get a little notebook, right? It doesn't have to be anything big, something small. Put it on its own page. So let me give you an example. Let's say you create a new Gmail address, right? You're making a new Gmail address. So at the top of the page, write the date. Write the date. And I'm going to explain why that's important. But write the date that you're making it. Number two, write down the username. Remember, in an email, the username is everything that comes before that @ symbol. Write down first the date. Write down in fact, write username, put a dash or a colon, and then write out what the username is. Then you may want to write the full email address out. In addition, then at the bottom, write password, a dash or a colon, and then the full password right there. And you may want to write it a couple of times in case maybe it gets smudged over time or whatever the case is. You want to write it in that format so that when you go to look it up, it's easy. It's easier to understand what you're looking for when you've done it that way. But if it's not labeled and you don't put all that information down, it just looks like a bunch of nonsense. The reason why it's important to put the date down is because that the company that you're making, the website that you're making that username or email address and password for is also going to take note of that date. So let's say, for example, someone tries to take your account. The company will send you an email that says, hey, we noticed that you tried to change the password for the email address created on this date. The last time you changed the password was this date. That'll be the date that you created it. If you have that record, then it's easier for you to say, no, that wasn't me, or yes, that was me, right? So it's important to put the date on there as well. So that's way number one to manage your password, is just to write them down. The second thing that you can do is use something called a password manager. Now, I will do full videos on each of these, or rather a full video with the details of how each of these works. So be on the lookout for that in the future. I don't want to make this video insanely long. I already know that a lot of my videos are long as it is, but I'll break down how each of these works in a different video. But you can do a digital password manager where you only have to remember a single password and you just put all of your other passwords in this app. And then anytime you go to log in, the password manager will just ask you for one password and then it'll give you all the rest of them. And you just copy and paste it in to where you need to log in. This is very efficient. This is what I use in a lot of cases because I want to believe at the core of who I am, that I have a great memory and that I'm a really smart person. And the longer I've been alive, I'm finding that these things are actually, in fact, not true. And so I need help when it comes to things like this. And so I use a password manager to help me. In addition, I also use what there is referred to MFA or 2FA. That stands for multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. Here's what that means. That means, on the one hand, you could successfully tell the person, the company, a secret, and they record it and they say, okay, got it, it's you. But then they want to add an extra level. an extra level of proof. And we'll talk about how that works in just a second. But it's really just another layer of the secret telling process. It's a second secret, or maybe in some cases a third secret. And the last is something called biometric password. So if your device has a fingerprint scanner or a face scanner that you can use to open it up, that becomes the password. Your face is the password. You don't have to remember anything. You're going to bring your face with you everywhere you go. So if you can set up biometric, that's really good. Now, keep in mind, if you change your hairstyle, if you wear glasses, it's not perfect. So I like to use my fingerprint instead of using my face because I may or may not have my glasses on. I may or may not have my face looking like it normally looks. And so it may not perfectly recognize me. So that's our 3 ways to simplify the password game, right? Use the password manager, whether it's online or it's just a little notebook. Number 2, use the multi-factor, the MFA, the multi-factor authentication, or use biometrics, right? Which is your face or your password, or your fingerprint. Now, just for a second, I want to explain a little bit more about the MFA, the multi-factor authentication. So before, you remember, you set up your email and essentially you told them a secret. The secret was a series of characters, right? You remember that? Now, here's what happens with multi-factor. They now want to flip the script and they want to become the secret teller. So on a different device, by means of a different application, they're going to send you a secret. Now they flip the script. Now they're going to tell you a secret and you have to tell it back to them. And oh, by the way, this secret is only good for a very brief window of time. Some of them give you 1 minute. Some of them give you 5 minutes. But it's a brief window of secret. And if you run out of time, you'll have to go back and say, send me another secret. Right? The reason why this is great is it is a very, very difficult thing to hack. Using this makes you almost unhackable because you have access to both sides. You're putting in your email address in the app with your password, but then in a separate application, you receive the secret. So the likelihood that the hacker would have both of these things is 0. So this is, to me, the ultimate trump card when it comes for security. There's nothing that's more effective at keeping you safe online than logging in using multi-factor or 2-factor authentication. It's just reversing the secret telling process. That's it. It's really just that simple. But it's a great way to stay safe. So we've covered a lot today. I told you we were going to have to do this password thing. It's really, really important. Let's just do a quick review to make sure that we've got it all locked in. So first of all, don't share your password over the phone, via text, or even in an email. Don't send it. Only on the login screen. That's the only place to put it in. And if you're asked to re-enter, just re-enter it. It's not to hold you back. Remember, we locked in for this. It's not a punishment. They're trying to keep you safe. So if you entered it and then you're prompted to re-enter, just re-enter. Use different passwords across all of your devices, for your bank, for your social media, for your email. Use different passwords, right? And lastly, remember that you're using a safe website. Remember, we want to check the URL before we put in our password. Now that, my friends, was a lot of information. If you're feeling right now, you know what, that didn't sink in at all, don't worry. You can, that's what's great. You can just go back and review it. Repetition is the mother of retention. So sometimes we have to hear things multiple times before it clicks for us. But I know you can figure it out. You've figured out other things in the past. This is just another one of those things that with time you will master. Thank you for joining our Friendly Tech Hour live stream. Don't forget, if you need one-on-one help, we're going to be beginning our 1 click at a time Monday premium live streams. Be on the lookout for that. And also, you can always book time with me one-on-one through our website, getfriendly.help. Feel free to check it out anytime. You know I'm there for you. Until next time, until specifically in this case tomorrow, when we'll be talking about the difference between Wi-Fi and mobile data. You don't want to miss it. So until then, stay safe, stay curious, be careful, and I'll see you then.